Hi everyone, I am Dr. Peiris. The today's lecture is 3-variable K-map. In today's lecture, first I'll show you how to do the 3-variable K-map. Then I'll explain you what are the rules we need to follow when we do grouping of adjacent ones. And then I'll show you how to simplify Boolean functions and expressions. So what is a 3-variable K-map? And why do we use the 3-variable K-maps? So basically the K-maps are used to obtain the minimized representation of any given function, which means you can obtain the same output with the minimum number of gates. So that's the basic idea of doing the K-maps. And how do we know the number of squares in a K-map? The number of squares in a K-map depends on number of inputs, which is given by 2 raised to the n. So n represents the number of inputs. So for a three variable K-map, we have 3 inputs, which means the number of squares is 2 raised to the third power going to equal to 8 squares, and each square represents a minterm. So this is what the order that you need to follow when we draw a 3-variable K-map. So if your input variables are in the order A, B, C, so the first one goes down, which represent the rows, and the other 2 variables goes up, which represent the columns. And the order for the minterms need to follow this particular order. So the first one M0, M1, M2 is right here, and M3 goes here. M4, M5, M6 goes here, and this is M7. So these are used in the binary values, but this one basically shows the same K-map but with the input variables. So the first one is 0, so this entire row is 0 since it is 0, which means this corresponds to a prime. And the next one is 1, so this entire row is 1, so it has to correspond to a since the input value is logic 1. Now this column represents 0, 0, since it is 0, 0, it has to be b prime, c prime. This is 0, 1, so it has to be b prime, c. Here both are 1, so it need to be B, C. Here B is 1, C is 0, so B, C prime. So this is what the basic 3-variable K-map, and this is what we use to simplify the functions which has 3 inputs. So what are the rules that we need to follow when we group minterms using K-maps? The goal is to minimize the number of terms as well as the number of literals or the variables in a term. So to minimize, we basically combine adjacent ones in a K-map and then make groups. So when you make groups, the number of ones in a group must be a power of 2, which means the number of ones in a group could be either 2, 4, 8, 16, and it continues. But these numbers or the number of ones in a group must be a power of 2. And the larger the number of ones combined, the smaller the number of literals or variables in the term. And in a 3-variable K-map, the first and the fourth columns are considered adjacent, which means you can use them when you group by making the assumption that they are adjacent. Let's see an example. So how do we simplify Boolean functions? So this given function has 3 inputs A, B, C, which means we are using a 3-variable K-map. And the order of the inputs are A, B, C. So I have the A written here and then the B, C goes there. And this is the same order that I explained you before. So all the time it is B prime, C prime, B prime, C, B, C, B, C prime. And this is always A prime, A. Now this function is expressed as a sum of minterms. Sum of minterms, so where the minterms are at 1, 2, 5 and 6. So you go to the K-map and then place the logic 1 at these minterms, because that's what it means by this sigma 1, 2, 5, 6 means the function value is 1 at these minterms. So you go to a minterm 1, place the logic 1, go to minterm 2, place a logic 1. Similarly for minterm 5 and 6, you put a logic 1. Now how do we combine these? How do we group the ones? So we need to group the adjacent ones. They need to be adjacent. It could be adjacent either horizontally or vertically. You cannot use diagonal. It should be only horizontal or vertical. So in this case, we can see very easily that 1 and 5 are adjacent. So you can make a group here. So what would be this group? So I am going to write function ABC using the minimized format by grouping the adjacent ones in the K-map. So this first group that we made, so this is the group that we made. So for this group, this entire column is valid. So which means B prime C is the term for this group, and there is no A because this is A prime and this is A, so it is not common. But for these both 1 and 1, for this entire group, the B prime C is common. So our term is going to be B prime C for that group. Now the next what we're going to group is 2 and 6. So we can group these two. Now what is the term for this group? So it is under this column BC prime, so which means this group is BC prime. So we write the groups as sum of n terms, so which means we put a plus, which basically tells that this is the OR gate between them. So the next one is BC prime. So this is the simplified Boolean function for this particular question. Now let's see another one. So this is FABC again, and the minterms are at 0, 1, 2, 3 and 7. Now how do we group this? So we said we need to group as much as ones in a single group. So if you can find a larger group, you need to make that group first. So the number of ones in a group could be either 2, 4, 8 or 16. Now if we look at this, you can see that entire first row has ones, which means we can make a larger group in that particular row because it has 4 ones, so which is the power of 2. So we can combine these 4 together to make a single group. So if we can do these 4s, you must do that first. Always be looking for the largest number of ones in a group. Now what is that group represent? So we going to write one at a time, so it is easy to follow the terms that we obtain. Now for this entire group, or for this is a row, so which means this entire row correspond to A prime. So we're going to have a prime term. Now do we have BC? Any letters come through B and C for this entire row? So if I look at this entire row, these are all different. These two are B prime, these two are B, which means nothing is common. Same for the C. This is C prime, this is C, this is C prime. So there is no common variable for all 4 columns, which means it's only A prime. So that's what happened when you group 4 ones. You're going to end up with only one letter. So which means it basically minimizes number of literals. And we have one more one left. So this one is left, so we need to make a group with that. So to make a group for that one, you can combine these two. That's the only way it is possible to combine. So we combine these two. So that term corresponds to what? So this is the column BC. So this column is BC, so it is common to both these two minterms. That's BC. So since these two are in 2 different rows, A is not common, but BC is common for both ones. So this is the minimized Boolean function for this particular question. Let's see the next one. So it's a similar question again, so we're going to go and mark the ones. So we have the ones at 0, 2, 4 and 6. So these are the ones at min term 0, 2, 4 and 6. Now how do we group this? So you need to think how to group this. So when I explain, I mentioned one special thing about adjacent columns. So we consider the first column and the fourth column as adjacent, which means you can make a larger group from these two columns. These are adjacent. This column and this column are adjacent, considered as adjacent. That means we can make a group like this. So they are grouped into one large circle. So these all four correspond to one large circle. So it is only a single group here. So what would be the output for this group? And now you need to figure out what is common for these four minterms. So basically the row is not common because they are in two different rows. So there is nothing comes from that term. So now if you look at this column and this column, which variable is common? This is b prime, this is b, so it is different. Now this is c prime, this is also c prime, which means c prime is common. So the only term that we are getting is c prime. So we simplified this function to a single literal. Another example, the minterms are at 0, 1, 3, 4 and 5. 0, 1, 3, 4, 5. Now how do we group these two terms? So let me write down the function. Now how do we group this? So we cannot group these three because there are only three. That is not the power of 2. So you cannot group these. You can group these two and group these two. But you can see you can make a very large group by combining these four, because there are four ones adjacent to each other, which means we can make a larger group here like this. So which gives 4 minterms in a single group. Now what is that group correspond to? So these two are in two different rows, so this is nothing common. Now what is common for this column and this column? Which variable is common? It's b prime here, this is also b prime, so that is definitely going to be there. Now how about the c? This is c prime, this is c, so they are different, which means we don't take that. So the only term is b prime. So again, as I said before, if you combine four ones, you're going to end up having a single variable. Now this is left, so we need to combine that. So we can do a group over here. You can combine 1 and 3. So for 1 and 3, what is the common variable? So both are in this row, which means a prime is common for both. And in terms of the two columns, what is common? So both this is in b prime c, this one is in b c. Now which variable is common? B prime b, this is different, but both are c and c, which means it is c. So that term is a prime c. This is how we do the grouping and finding the terms using K-maps. Another one, let's simplify this Boolean function. 0, 2, 5, 6, 7. So these are the minterms. Now how do we group this one? So we can do many different ways. How do we group this one? So definitely we have to assume that this is and this column are adjacent. So we consider the first and the fourth column are adjacent, which means this can be grouped with that one. So it is going to be grouped with this one. So let's write that down first. So one term at a time. So that's going to be, so they both are on a prime column. So we have a prime Now in terms of the columns, what is common? This is B prime, C prime, this is B, C prime. So if you look at it, you can see that C prime is common for both columns. So the term is A prime, C prime. Now how do we group the other ones? So this one can be grouped with this one. So we can make a group here. So that group is BC prime. BC prime. And then we can simply combine these two. So that is going to be both on A, the row A. So A is common. Now for the two columns, C is common. AC. So you have to make sure one more thing, when you do grouping, you need to reduce the number of groups also. So reduce number of groups as much as possible. So make sure that you reduce the number of groups as much as possible. This question can be done in another way also. We can do the grouping in another way. So I'm going to show you that also. So here the minterms are. So let's see the other way of grouping. So definitely we need to group this one as before we did. So this function f a b c equals, so the first term is A prime, C prime. Now how can we do the others? So let's say I definitely need to combine the 5 with 7. So I combine these two. So this term is what? This is A, and for these two C is common. AC. Now this one. So in this case we combine with this 2, right? But here we can combine with 7 if you want. You can go either way. You can combine with that, or you can combine with this. So before we combine with the 2, now let's combine with 7. You can do that way also. So if we combine with 7, this row is again A, and the common variable is B. It's going to be A, B. So for this particular question, both answers are correct, because it's give the same number of terms, 3 terms and 6 literals. So 6 literals here also. It gives the same number of terms and same number of literals. So both answers are acceptable. If there is any case that you group into many different ways, but if one case gives you more terms or more literals, so that is not suitable. You need to find out the grouping which gives you the lowest number of terms as well as lowest number of literals. Another one, 0, 6, 7. 0, 6, 7. So in this case we can combine these two. So that correspond to, this is row A, and the common variable is B. A, B. Now what do we do for this one? There is no any other ones that we can combine this one with, which means it is going to stay alone. But don't forget to write that, because you still need to keep that count in your answer. So that term correspond to what? This correspond to A prime, B prime, C prime. A prime, B prime, C prime. So don't forget that you still have that term. Make sure that you write that down in the final expression. Now let's see how do we simplify Boolean expressions, which means your question is in terms of variables. It doesn't directly give you the minterms. If there are no minterms given, how do we find these? How do we draw this on a K-map and then do the grouping? So you're basically going to go and look each and every term and then put the ones on the K-map. So this is B prime C, which means we go and look the term B prime C. So here is B prime C, which means I need to put ones in both minterms 1 and 5. So B prime C correspond to this one. The next one, A prime B C prime. A prime is this entire row, but I need BC prime. So BC prime. So this is basically A prime BC prime. This square correspond to A prime BC prime. I put a 1 here. And similarly A BC prime. This is A. Now we look for BC prime. Here is BC prime. So this is A BC prime. Put a 1 here. And then you do the same method that you did for the other questions to do the grouping. So we can group this one. So that corresponds to B prime C. And then the next grouping is here, which is BC prime. So you can see the original function had 3 terms, here only 2 terms and 4 literals. This one has 3, 6, 8. This one has 8 literals. This is only 4 literals with 2 terms. So it is the most simplified version. Another one like that, A prime C. So let's see where is A prime C. This entire row is A prime and we looking for C. So this is C, this is also C. So I have A prime C here and here. Next one, B prime C prime. So here is B prime C prime. So this entire column is B prime C prime. You put the ones in there. Next one, BC prime. Here is the BC prime. So both columns, both squares going to mark with 1. Now how do we group this one? So you see I have 4, which I can make a bigger group here. So write that down. So that group is going to be what? This is the entire row A prime, and all the other B and C are different. So nothing is common in terms of B and C. It's only A prime. That's A prime. Now how to group these? So this column and this column adjacent, so you can group 4 and 6, but that is not the best way to do it, because we can do a group like that, which means I can group 4 ones in that single group. If I do only 4 and 6, it gives me only 2 ones. But if I group this way, it gives me 4 ones, which means it is going to reduce 1 literal. So you must group it like this, considering both, because you have a 1 here, you have a 1 here, which means you can do a bigger group like this. Now what is that group correspond to? It's 2 different rows, so nothing is common here. Now for this column and this column, what is common? C prime common. So this is A prime or C prime. So make sure that you do these things properly. It has to be a single group with largest number of 1. And the next one, now we need A prime C. This is A prime, here is C and C, so we mark ones over here. Next, A prime C prime, here is again A prime, C prime is here and here, C prime. Next, A B C prime, this is A, I need BC prime, here is BC prime. So this square corresponds to A BC prime. Then you're going to group it. So again we do that large group with 4 ones, which correspond to A prime. This is the entire row A prime, and 4 different columns, so nothing common in terms of B and C. It's A prime, and this one combined with the one in the 2, and this column is BC prime. So this is how you do the grouping in 3 variable K maps. So that's all about this lecture, 3 variable K maps. I'll meet you again with another video with 4 variable K maps, as well as more other topics for this course. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr.Peiris Classroom, as well as visit my website drpeirisclassroom.com for more videos of this class, as well as for other classes. I have gathered all the videos at one place in my website, so you can easily find them. Thanks for watching everyone. I'll meet you again with another video. Bye.